вас з днем народження. Це книжка про безстрашних дівчат. Я вірю, що ви безстрашна дівчина. Вона є англійською, але вам може допомогти Марко, Маркіян. Ну або ви можете самі попробувати зрозуміти та вивчити англійську. Тому з днем народження і ця історія для вас. How Mizilca tricked a sultan and saved her father from disgrace. In Romania, long ago, there lived an old knight who was also a master of magic and sorcery. One day, a messenger arrived at his castle sent by the Sultan. The Sultan was gathering an army for his latest war and demanded every knight in his kingdom to serve him for a year and a day. Failing that, each knight must send a son in his stead, otherwise they would be disgraced and put to death. The old and noble knight was too frail to go himself, but he had no sons to send. His three beautiful daughters were his pride and joy, but girls were not allowed to fight. In despair, the knight stopped eating and smiling, even when his daughters were around. He took to his bed, sighing deeply and shaking his head. His eldest daughter, Stanuta, came to him. "Dear father, whatever is the matter?" she asked gently. "Are you ill? Or have we done something wrong?" "No, no, my child," the knight replied sadly. "It's not your fault, and I'm not ill." He told her about the Sultan's request, asking her to keep it a secret from her sisters. "Don't worry, father," Stanuta smiled. "I am tall and strong. If I dress like a man and cut my hair short and can be a son, I'll wait by the Sultan's side and no one will know the difference." The old knight was horrified as the thought of his daughter setting up for the Sultan's court. Headstrong Stanuta would not change her mind, so he decided to use his magic to dissuade her. Stanuta had her long hair cut off, and her father gave her the finest horse from his stables. He stood his shield and trusty sword and washed her right away. Then, ignoring his many aches and pains, he jumped on his own horse and galloped across the fields until he came to a bridge at the boundary of his islands. There, he used his magic to turn himself into a blue boar and hid in the woods beside the river. Soon Stanuta came riding up and had almost reached the bridge when the boar charged straight at her, snorting smoke through his nostrils. Stanuta screamed in terror and pulled the reins to run her horse around. She galloped back to her castle. Next, the knight's second daughter, Roxana, came to see her father. "Dear father, we're so worried about you," she said softly. "You still seem so very sad. Whatever is the matter?" Her father told her about his dilemma, and like her sister, she begged to go into Sultan's palace disguised as a boy. "Please, father," she pleaded. "I'll ride straight to the palace and I won't let any boars get in my way." Roxana immediately cut off her long hair, and her father gave her his second best sword and dented old child. Then she set off down the road. And as she did so, her father jumped up from his sick bed, mounted his horse and galloped off across the fields until he came to a bridge. There he uses his magic to turn himself into a red lion and hid among the trees. When Roxana reached the bridge, the lion leaped out at her with blood-curdling roar. Terrified, Roxana gave a loud scream and pulled her reins to run her horse around. Then she galloped home as fast as she could. The old knight's youngest daughter, Mizilca, was the bravest of three sisters. She went to her father and asked for his permission to ride off to serve the Sultan. "Dearest Mizilca," her father replied fondly, "I cannot allow you to go. Your sisters are older and stronger than you, and they have failed. How do you hope to succeed? Stay at home and keep me company in my old age." Mizilca was not ready to give up. She knew that her father had doted on her, and that she eventually would get her own way. "Father, please let me go," she begged. "Boars and lions don't frighten me." "I absolutely forbid it," grumbled her father. Mizilca kept begging and pleading until he couldn't stand it any longer. He agreed to let her go, but he only gave her his trustiest sword, his oldest glance, and battered child, and an ancient horse that hasn't been ridden in years. Mizilca was too excited to care. She cut her long hair, put on her boyish disguise, and prepared to set out. As she left the castle, her father was already on his way. He raced across the fields and reached the bridge, where he uses his magic to turn into a green dragon. Then he hid in the woods and lay in wait for her. Before long, Mizilca came riding by the bridge, and at once the dragon rushed to her, breathing out great clouds of fire. Mizilca was not like her sisters. She didn't panic or run her horse around. She galloped straight at the dragon, holding her sword ready to fight, because before she could start a blow, the dragon turned on its heels and fled. The old knight was very relieved to get back to the castle in one piece that day. Instead of going after the dragon, Mizilca crossed the bridge and rode, not stopping until she reached the Sultan's palace. There, she approached the Sultan and bowed low. Your Majesty, she said, I am the old knight's son and have come to pay my father's debt to you. The Sultan looked her up and down. He thought she looked like a girl dressed like a boy, but he couldn't be sure about it. So he welcomed her warmly into his band of knights. As the weeks passed, Mizilca proved that she could ride a shoot bow just as well as any of the Sultan's knights. Yet, still, the Sultan had his doubts. So he went to see an old wise woman and asked her advice in finding out if Mizilca was a girl or a boy. That's easy, cackled the wise woman. While the land is out hunting, have merchants come to the palace, tell them to set up their stalls in Great Hall. On one side they should lay their finest clothes and embroideries. On the other side they should lay their finest daggers and swords. If the knight is a girl, she'll choose the pretty clothes. If he's a boy, he'll go for the weapons. The Sultan wasn't so sure, but he did as the wise woman said and summoned merchants to set up their wares. Mizuka had never really been particularly interested in fashion though, so she wore fine clothes and went straight to the weapons. Still, the Sultan was not convinced and went to see the wise woman again. Have your cook make some buckwheat porridge, she told him, then mix it with some pearls. If the knight is a girl, she'll pick out the pearls and save them. If he's a boy, he'll throw them away. However, the wise woman was wrong. Mizilca, like the gods of other girls, had never developed a taste of precious stones and jewels. He took her bowl of porridge, picked out the pearls, then tossed them onto the table as they were nothing worthless stones. The Sultan paid one final visit to the wild woman, for he still was not certain. Scatter flowers all over the floor of the great hall and call your knights in, she said. If the knight is a girl, she will step lightly over the flowers or pick them up and make a bouquet. If he is a boy, he'll step on them and squash them. Again, the Sultan did as the wise woman advised. However, Mizuka was reading a particularly good book on the way to dinner, and she didn't even notice the beautiful flowers as she crushed them underfoot. At last, a year and a day had passed, and it was time for Mizuka to head home. She took her leave of her yellow knights and mounted her old horse. The Sultan himself came out to say farewell. You have served me well, he said to her. Your father should be proud of you, and his debt is paid. But before you go, I have one last question. Are you a boy or a girl? Mighty Sultan, she replied respectfully. That doesn't really matter. I served you as well as any of the boys, did I not? But, pleaded the Sultan, if you are a woman, how did you pass all my tests? Mizilca hasn't ever realized the Sultan had been testing her. She asked him what his tests were. When the Sultan told her, she burst out laughing. She laughed and laughed until tears of joy streamed down her face. She laughed so hard that her hat fell off, and her long hair, by now grown back, stubbled over her shoulders. You old-fashioned fool, haven't you realized, said Mizilca. Women are no more alike than men, and a great many of young male knights love fine clothes and pearls too. Then, spurring on her horse, Mizilca galloped off towards her father's castle, where a sumptuous feast had been prepared. And from that day on, every knight in the land showed Mizilca and all women the greatest respect. З днем народження!